This morning I saw a post on my Facebook feed, and it was of biblical content, biblical nature. And of course I'm reading it through the lens of my emotions, my former wounding, and the awareness of our deeper psychological needs, often expressed by way of validating ourselves, validating our needs and expectations. And in this post, biblical passages were used to reinforce the expectations that our ego holds when it comes to relationships, right? One thing that I understand is that our ego has all of these expectations and demands. And these expectations and demands usually revolve around having our emotional needs met, our intimate needs met, right? And so when that becomes disrupted because of our unconscious trauma, then because most of our intimate relationships are actually trauma bonds of codependency, where we are so emotionally enmeshed with our partner that it is true codependency in the full sense of the word, right? And the problem with trauma bonded, emotionally bonded codependency is that when our subconscious wounds begin to surface, right? This particular post was about resentment, when a partner harbors resentment in the relationship. And which is something that is driven by a trauma wound, an unconscious trauma wound of, not having been seen or validated during childhood. So these trauma wounds begin to surface in your relationship. But because we are so wounded ourselves, we are only aware of our ego's need, emotional need, ego's expectation of having your partner meet your emotional and intimate needs. See, ego is only aware of its own needs. It's not aware of why your partner may be withdrawing, what your partner may be suffering in the subconscious. So ego, and that's in most cases, because every one of us has a wounded ego, see. But if we're not aware, we are going to reach for the Bible to bolster up our ego's demands and expectations and get, quote unquote, God to validate our expectations and demands by resorting to the quote unquote wisdom of the Bible or the authority of the Bible. looking through my lens of my own wounding and being aware of my own wounding, all that I was able to see in the post is victim shaming, and with admonitions of how you need to get yourself right so that you can get back to this intimate relationship and nurture the intimate relationship of codependency, right? You can't have a healthy relationship if your relationship is a trauma bond, because you are relating from the commonality of your shared trauma. And so you are in this abusive cycle of feeling like you have to meet expectations, and then you feel resentment. It feeds this cycle of what's the word here? Of self-abandonment. It's a cycle of self-abandonment, and it is toxic. That's why relationships remain in these abusive cycles, where there's abuse and then you make up, and then there's abuse again, and it's like a tailspin, the snake eating its own tail. But what I was actually wanting to say with this video is that because 99.8% of all of humanity is wounded with trauma, such a person should never handle the Bible, because we use the Bible as a weapon, or a weapon of defense, to validate ourselves by pointing out someone else is wrong, right? Really, it is finger pointing. It doesn't matter what you quote from the Bible. It is finger pointing, trying to make the other person see their error. Okay? But that's not how you will ever rectify the error. Because the Bible does not have an answer for trauma. You can look throughout the entire book. The Bible will not give you an answer on how to resolve your trauma. Jesus dying for you on the cross isn't going to touch your trauma. It requires a self-awareness, which comes through feeling your own impoverished emotions, from feeling the pain of your trauma emotions. And in feeling the pain, you are not going to seek out the toxic condemnation of how you should be, and you're not measuring up, which is psychologically abusive to a person that is already traumatized. The Bible will not give you an answer. The Bible will condemn you. In particular, if the Bible is used in the hands of a trauma-wounded person that seeks to justify their egoic demands and expectations. So people, on the one hand, the Bible is toxic on its own. Secondly, wounded people who handle the Bible make it even more toxic, because they use it to try and bolster up their ego. So, what's my point here? Just an observation. You can't use the Bible to heal anyone if you are using it to validate and affirm your ego. Right? So, that's my perspective. That is perspective through self-awareness of the wounding that life has dealt me, and the condemnation that I have felt from the Bible for being wounded, right? The Bible makes it feel like it's all your fault, and you better straighten up, or else you are at fault for your relationship failing too. You see, it's a burden of guilt that is being heaped on the partner. Expectations. That's the grueling cross of the ego. The expectations and attachments of ego to the entitlement of my partner bears the responsibility of making me happy, of making this relationship work. That is a false premise, and that is why relationships break, because that burden cannot be carried by human shoulders, right? So the solution, as far as I can see it now, is, again, it's dealing with the self-abandonment wound, becoming self-aware of your childhood trauma, where your needs were not met in childhood, because our adult relationships are just a carryover of trying to get those needs met now as adult people. But these are still our unmet childhood needs speaking into the life of our adult lives. And at some point we have to grow up and take responsibility for our adult life, right? This reliance on having someone else fulfill me, make me happy, make my relationship work, isn't going to work anymore. That worked under the patriarchy, under the old age of the patriarchy, right? Where there was a master and a servant. There was inequality. And all relationships were built on this inequality. We have so much to change, so much to heal, and not be so reliant for our immediate psychological and emotional and physical and sexual needs from someone else. There is an over-demand to where it becomes taxing and depleting. We just need to heal by ourselves. We need to heal ourselves, and you can't do that in partnership. The problem is the ego, that we're not self-aware of our ego. And ego is a demanding son of a bitch. So, that's all I have to say.